This is Akashvani. In the program Spotlight, now we bring you a discussion on India-Egypt Strategic Partnership. The participants are Yogesh Gupta, former diplomat, and Simran Sodhi, journalist.
Today we are discussing the visit of Prime Minister Narendra Modi to Egypt. The visit has been described as historic, and the Prime Minister also received the Order of the Nile, which is Egypt's highest honor. We find that a number of agreements were also reached, and this visit also marks a new positive and a new high between India and Egypt. Ambassador Gupta, when you look at this visit of the Prime Minister, how much of a positive boost does this provide to the India-Egypt relationship?
It was an extremely important visit. It may be recalled that India and Egypt, they have had historically close relations in the 1950s and later. During the days of non-alignment, Prime Minister Nehru and President Nasser were close friends. And that friendship has continued over the years, though of course situation has changed since those days. Now, of course, it's an era of multi-alignment on different issues. The president of Egypt was here in India at our Republic Day, and then our Prime Minister decided to reciprocate this visit. Egypt plays an important role both in the Middle East as well as Africa. It's on the gateway to Europe. Egypt has a big economy. It has been an important trade partner. Politically speaking, it has played an important role in issues relating to Palestine, in issues relating to the Arab world and so on. And India and Egypt have got extremely important trade relations. Our trade is more than $6 billion, in which India's exports were about more than $4 billion and imports around $2 billion. China has been playing a very important role in Egypt. It is trying to build a new capital there. And when India says that we are trying to revitalize, reinvigorate our relationship with the developing countries, with the global south, then Egypt plays a very important role. And now that we are chairman of the G20, it becomes all the more important. So in this larger context, if we see India's relationship with Egypt is extremely important. And Prime Minister took the opportunity of visiting Egypt while returning from the US so that we could strengthen our bonds with this country.
Ambassador Gupta, we also see that the Prime Minister's visit, some analysts have also hailed it as a potential game changer for bilateral ties. They say that it is expected that this trip will pave the way for a substantial increase in India's investment in Egypt, and this will also provide Egypt a passage or a gateway to enter BRICS, which is an economic bloc. How do you see this potential entry of Egypt into BRICS, and how important this would be overall for BRICS also?
Number of countries have shown interest seeking admission into BRICS. Egypt is one of them. Iran recently expressed interest. Then there are a number of other countries such as Saudi Arabia. They have expressed interest. The last meeting of the BRICS country, which was held in South Africa, they discussed this issue and the interest of various countries, and they decided that, first of all, expert group should decide on the criteria which should be followed by the grouping for admission of the new members. And once the criteria for admission of the new members has been approved by the group, then they will consider the cases of individual members. So that is the overall situation where in regard to BRICS. As far as investments are concerned, yes, you are right. Egypt is an important source of fertilizers, gas, crude oil, and these are items in which India is interested. We would like to import more. Then Egypt has shown interest in purchase of Tejas fighter aircraft, which we are manufacturing in Bengaluru. And one of the suggestions that we are working on is that if this agreement goes through, then India could set up a line for manufacturing Tejas aircraft in Egypt, which could be also used for other countries in Africa and Arab world, and this could fulfill their defense needs. So that is a possibility that we are working on. And then as far as our trade is concerned, another point that Egypt says is that we should try to utilize our own currencies for purchases for the trade. Like India is exporting wheat, rice, cotton and other items. India would like to purchase crude oil, gas and fertilizers. So instead of using dollars, we could use our local currencies to trade these items on both sides. So that's something very interesting for us because we would also be like to pursuing our trade in these currencies instead of using dollars, which are scarce sometimes for both countries. So there are various possibilities for expanding our trade and investments in Egypt. And Prime Minister's visit has given an opportunity to discuss our interests and pursue these ideas.
Ambassador Gupta, we've also seen that India and Egypt have enjoyed close ties. They were also both founding members of the 1961 Non-Aligned Movement, and that was a global forum of 120 developing countries that believed in the non-alignment of major power blocs. So this is a very old relationship which both countries have carried forward. And some observers also feel that this would give India a stronger position to be the voice of the global south, especially as India gears up to host the G20 summit in September, where Egypt is also invited as a guest country. So how does this play up and strengthen India's position as being the voice of the global south?
Yes, you're right, because maybe recall that a few months back, India had organized a summit at the level of the Prime Minister with the developing countries, and a large number of them had attended this summit. So the idea is that the COVID that affected all of us and the Ukraine war, they have created a number of problems for the developing countries, including the issues of debt, including the issues of green development, requirement of vaccines, medicines, pharmaceuticals, and so on. So the idea is that, we should be able to convey the requirements of developing countries in important forums like the G20 so that the developed world is to understand and appreciate, that Ukraine war and other recent developments have added to the problems of developing countries, and more steps need to be taken to address these issues. So that is our expectation. That is what we are trying to do. And we hope that by strengthening our relations with countries like Egypt, we will be able to take on board the concerns of developing countries on these issues as we dialogue with the developed world. So the Prime Minister's visit provided an excellent opportunity to strengthen our relations with Egypt, learn their point of view, and then project their fears and point of view of other developing countries to the developed countries.
We also see that the Foreign Secretary, he announced that the 4 agreements that were signed during the visit of the Honorable Prime Minister, first, the most important and a landmark development in the history of the bilateral relationship was the signature on the strategic partnership between India and Egypt. It was signed by the Honorable Prime Minister Narendra Modi and the Honorable President of Egypt. Master Gupta, how do you see the fact that this is today a strategic partnership, and Egypt also one of the countries which offers India a gateway into Africa and the Middle East, and also the Suez Canal is there. So how much does Egypt and India gain from one another in this bilateral relationship?
As I mentioned earlier, our expectation is that we should be able to meet the critical needs of each other. Let's say in the field of defense, India is now manufacturing a large number of defense equipment. Recently, we built our own aircraft carrier. We are manufacturing fighter aircraft, helicopters, different types of missiles, which we are exporting to a number of developing countries recently, such as Philippines, Indonesia, and so on. So Tejas aircraft, for instance, has attracted the interest of Egypt and some other countries. And the expectation is that if we are able to conclude agreements in Egypt, then we can establish a line to manufacture Tejas aircraft in Egypt. And those can be used also for other countries in Africa as well as the Arab world. And that will give us opportunity to expand and improve our production, improve our links with these countries across Africa, across the developing countries of the Arab world and so on. So in that sense, the visit was extremely important to build up our links with the countries of Africa and the developing world.
Master Gupta, we see that the Prime Minister also met members of the Indian community there, and he also interacted with prominent Egyptians. And the Foreign Secretary, in a briefing, he said that the objective of the meetings between Mr. Modi and prominent Egyptians was to ensure a more vibrant people-to-people exchanges between India and Egypt. How do you see this people-to-people exchange? And we have also seen, for example, Bollywood movies are very popular in Egypt. So how far does this take the bilateral relationship, the people-to-people exchange, and the soft power of India, which is very popular in Egypt?
People-to-people exchanges are extremely important in a comprehensive relationship that we are trying to develop with Egypt as well as other countries. Because unless we have close ties, unless we have more exchanges, more visits, we have more cultural interaction between India and other countries, we will not get to know each other well. We will not get to know each other better. So the idea is that if we are able to encourage more Indians to visit Egypt for tourism, if we are able to encourage the export of Bollywood movies to these countries, if we are able to send more, let's say, cultural troops and get similarly more people from these countries into India, more of their artists, more of their experts into India, then that strengthens the basis, that strengthens the content of our bilateral relationship. And that is what we are trying to do. And I think somewhere we had lagged behind in recent years in this area. And the visit of the Prime Minister will fulfill one of the more important needs to develop our relations comprehensively with Egypt and other developing countries.
Mr. Gupta, we also see that 3 memoranda of understanding in the fields of agriculture, archaeology and antiquities, and competition law were also signed. And the two sides discussed multilateral cooperation at the G20 and other topics like food, energy security, and climate change. And we've also seen that with the conflict in Ukraine, there was a lot of worries about food security and supply chains. Do you feel that both India and Egypt cooperating on these matters also globally ensures a stronger and more resilient supply chains?
Yes, this is an issue which has caused a lot of worry because Ukraine war has caused shortages of food, it has caused disruptions in supply chains, it has escalated the prices of energy such as crude oil, natural gas and so on. And the idea is that the problems of developing countries must be conveyed to the developed world and we must create supply chains which are independent of the countries which are involved in the conflict. For instance, food. Now, Ukraine was a very important source of export of food, and it has badly affected the supply of food. India is trying within its limited resources to export more food to developing countries wherever possible, and we have been exporting wheat, we have been exporting rice to Egypt as well as to other developing countries. So the idea is that we should try to take care of the needs of developing countries wherever we can. Now, environment is another field which has been hit hard because of these conflicts and because of the difficulties that the developing countries have been going through. Their earnings have gone down and they need more support in terms of climate-friendly technologies which India and other countries can provide. This is yet another area, where we can work on the needs of developing countries. So the expectation and the hope is that we will be able to work together with other countries to meet the needs of developing countries in the areas of food, in the areas of energy, in the areas of medicines, pharmaceuticals, vaccines, and so on.
And in the coming days, we will continue our discussions on the India-Egypt relationship, and we will also discuss more aspects of the Prime Minister's historic visit to Egypt. With these comments, we bring today's discussion to an end. Thank you.
You were listening to a discussion on India-Egypt strategic partnership. The participants were Yogesh Gupta, former diplomat, and Simran Sodhi, journalist. This program was produced and presented by the News Services Division of Akashvani. You can listen to it on our mobile app, News on AIR. This program is also available on our YouTube channel, News on AIR Official. You may share your feedback about this program through email at airnsdtalks@gmail.com or WhatsApp on 9289094044.